I wrote a poem every day for 7 days straight. Well, let me take a look at the dashboard. I started on the 1st of February, wrote on the 2nd of February, wrote on the 3rd of February, wrote on the 4th of February, wrote on the 5th of February, wrote on the 6th of February. It's more like, more like 6 days straight. Yeah, I wrote a poem for 6 days straight. Now, why did I even decide to write a poem every day for a week? Right? Why? Well, for me, I loved writing poetry, but the problem was that there wasn't a habit of showing up, right? So because there wasn't a habit of showing up, there was no way I could improve my poems. And because there was no way of improving my poems, there was no way I could get better. So I told myself I made it go really, really simple and straightforward. That way it would not be overwhelming when it comes to writing. I said I was going to write a poem every day. Now the only rule I had was that the poem had to be a minimum of 10 lines. Right, that was just the rule. There was no rule to structure, to theme, or anything. I could write about anything, but the one rule was that it had to be a minimum of 10 lines. And I gave myself time, which was that I was going to write every day by 8 p.m., which is in the evening. And there was not necessarily a time to, okay, I was going to write for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. No, the goal was to write. So it was to write. I was going to make sure I start by 8 p.m. and write. So if it takes me 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, as long as it takes for me to write a minimum of 10 lines, that's what I'm going to spend to write the poem. And that's what I did. So when it got to 8 p.m., before that time, I set an alarm for 8 p.m. And so when it got to 8 p.m., the alarm would ring and I would just take my phone and start typing and writing. And I have a Notion dashboard that I use to track how long it took me to write each of the each of the each of the stories. Sorry, the poems. Okay. The first day when I started, it took me 10 minutes, right? The next day it took me 8 minutes. The day after that it took me 3 minutes. The day next it took me 6 minutes. The other day 7 minutes, and then yesterday it took me another 7 minutes. So I'm able to get a glimpse of, okay, this is how long I spend writing. And yeah, so running back to the why I started writing, it was simply to create a habit and to put my time where my mouth is. I said I wanted to be a writer, so it was high time it, it was time I started writing and spending time doing what I said I wanted to do, right? For me, what was the process? Let's move on to the process. What was the process like? Well, the process was pretty simple. I would just sit down and I would just write. Now there were days where it felt like I had the muse whispering in my ear, and there were days where I was asking myself, like, dude, seriously, what are you even writing? Like, this is absolute. But I was like, I wasn't permitted to judge, to edit, to do anything. My goal was just to sit down and write. Now, for me, the first week, I realized that the major goal and the primary goal was to show up. That was the goal. That was that was like, as long as I show up, I have succeeded with I have won. Like, that's it. The goal wasn't to write a pretty poem. The goal wasn't to write an excellent poem. The goal wasn't to write a poem of 40 lines. No, the goal was simply to show up. And that I did. I showed up every day and I wrote, which felt really satisfying. So the process was pretty much that was just what it felt like and everything. Now there were days where, yeah, I told you alone, where I felt like I knew what I was doing, and there were other days where I felt like, what am I even doing writing? Okay, yeah. So what have I learned? Quickly, I want to talk about what I've learned. What have I learned doing this challenge? The first thing is that you have to show up for anything to happen, right? I can't say I'm a writer and not show up and not practice and not write and expect miracles to happen. Yeah, I get that I have a lot of inspiration and all that, but I think basically there are two things that tell how important something is to you: your money and your time, right? Your money. If you tell me that, okay, if you look at the man's bank statement, you're able to see the things that he puts of extinct value in his life, in his bank balance, in his bank statement. And if you also look at his time, let's say you track his time for over the course of 6 months, everything and every micro thing he spends his time doing, how long he spends his time doing those things. If you're able to, if there was a way to track and measure that data, what you'll notice is that the man, it will become clear and obvious. First of all, you see his routines, you see his habits, you see the things he really, really loves, and he doesn't even know that he loves. He spends time doing them, and it becomes obvious that okay, this is what is very, very, he likes doing and he loves doing. Because you can't say, I'll give an example. You can't say you love your kids and you really don't have any time for them, right? No time. Like how do you explain it? I know there are circumstances and all that, but you should have time. Like, okay, this is when I'm okay, I'm able to say this, I'm able to do this, right? If you don't have time, it becomes you saying this thing and what you mean is another thing, right? It's just like if you're having a conversation with someone and you're like, wow, that would be great, I'd love to have a conversation with you, but your face, your facial expression is like, if you talk to me, I will punch you. Don't even try it. I am not even ready. Do I look like I care? Look at my face. I don't look like I care. I don't want to talk or say anything. Like, just say hi and move on. Right now is not the time for unnecessary conversation. That's what your face is saying. But you're like, wow, that's great. You're like, oh, okay, no, how do I say it? Oh, wow, that's great. But that's just it, right? That's just it. So we need to align what we say we love and what we love so that they become one. That way we are truly happy. Because if we say we love writing and we don't spend time showing and expressing that love, what happens is that we spend all our day wishing that we could write, wishing that we could tell our stories, which is really, really sad. Okay, so I want to read my favorite line, okay, favorite poem of the week and favorite lines. The favorite poem of the week for me, I won't do a screen recording because I don't, for just copyright purpose, I don't want to show everything. The dashboard is not yet ready. When if you want to see a screen recording of what my Notion dashboard looks like, let me know and I would probably make a video on a podcast or a video about that, or maybe a newsletter, whatever, depending on the use case. Now, the poem I call it Scribbled Piece. Scribbled Piece, to scribble and then piece, the piece, right? Okay. Now, I think I'll just read out the poem for you. Yeah. Now, the poem is absolutely messy. I have to be honest with you, it's absolutely messy. And I don't even know what I'm writing. I know I need a lot of feedback on this poem, but I'm glad that I showed up and I'm glad I wrote, right? So it's not really about the poem, it's more about that I showed up and I feel like a writer. Now, for emphasis, I didn't say I feel like an excellent writer. I didn't say I feel like a great writer. I didn't say I feel like a good writer. I didn't say I feel like a popular writer. I didn't say I feel. Gee, there are no adjectives. I feel like a writer. It is the noun that I'm clinging to. That's what I'm holding on to. That is what I want. Once I can hold on to that now, every other thing doesn't really matter for me. For now, I'm just getting started, right? So, what I mean by I feel like a writer. To be a writer, a writer is someone who writes. And so every time I'm not writing, it gets me to start questioning, you know. So it's not necessarily publishing work. It's more like writing, showing up and writing, right? It doesn't have to be every day. Let me be clear, it doesn't have to be every day, but for example, let's say the past 6 months you've not even written anything, not even scribbled, not even scratch, man, that's haunting, right? But when you write, and even if you write it and end up squeezing it and putting it in the trash bin, what happens is that you feel like a writer because you're writing. Now, granted that the adjectives will change over time. There are certain days you feel like a great writer, the other days you feel like an absolutely terrible writer. There are days where you feel like a pretty writer. There are days where you feel like a popular writer because your work got accepted in a literary magazine. And you feel like, wow, you know. The adjectives keep changing, they keep changing, they keep changing. But one thing is constant, and one thing is in my control, is that if I keep writing, I will be a writer. And nobody can contest that. You can't take that away from me. Right. So that's what I'm clinging on. And that's why I decided to say, okay, let me start writing consistently and let me make sacrifices and make trades so that the things I really love and things I say I really value, I am spending time on those things. One of the great things about writing is that it's really cheap to do, unlike some other hobbies or professions that it takes a lot of money and cost in order to even practice or do those things, right? Writing with a paper and pen, which is in most countries is really, really cheap. Even if it's not cheap, you can even get recycled paper, or not even recycled paper. You can go to the waste bin and even get like I'm just playing out the worst case scenario, but most of us like we can afford to get a notebook and a pen to write, and most of us we have mobile phones, laptops to write. So it's really, 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 really cheap. That's all you need. You just need that, and then sit down and start thinking of stories, and you write, right? Compared to other professions like let's say you're a painter, you need paint, you need canvas. Those are costs that they tell you how much for oil paint and all those things. I'm not really into that feed, but I know this stuff is expensive compared to writing. Now, yeah, I said I was going to read the Scribbled Piece, but I ended up rambling and talking about other things. So we're back to the poem, the Scribbled Piece. Scribbled Piece. I wrote it on the 1st of February 2025. Yeah, it's still in progress. I need to edit it and work on a lot of things. It took me 10 minutes to write. And so I'll proceed. The first line, and I read, "There is a music that plays after the songs we knew stopped playing. There is a day dawned on me after the night broke into a heavy surprise. There are steps running into oblivion and back. What I know is after my scribbled piece. I am a stick figure moving and not moving at any point in time. I am yesterday's morning dew. I am today's cloud. I am the forthcoming news the village is waiting for. I am you." I really, I kind of, I'm not saying the poem is great, but I loved it. Yeah, like, I know there are a lot of potential. Yeah, but it's really, really nice. Yeah, it's really, really nice. So that's the point. That's the point. If you have any feedback on it, you can uh, drop it or reply or, or drop in the comments. That would be exciting. So I'm looking down because of the outline I scribbled down for the video. Okay, so the thing is, what's next for me, right? The thing that's next for me is next week. What I'm going to be doing is I started showing up for 1 week. Next week, I am going to copy other writers. So what I mean by copying other writers, it means I will look at great poets and imitate them. Right now, I know I have been through a lot of overwhelming circumstances. So what I want to do is make it really, really simple. And so the writer that I'm picking for, the writer I'm picking for right now I'm picking for next week, which the poet I'm picking from next week is I need to let me check his name so I make sure I'm pronouncing it well. I love his poem. Like it's not there are a lot of poems, but his own it resonates with me. You know how most writers they tell you, oh yeah, yeah, this man is a great poet, and you're like, yeah, yeah, you said he's a great poet, so he's a great poet. And then there are those where you just wow, this work is absolutely exciting. His name is Carl Sandburg. How do you even pronounce it? I don't know. But it's Carlsandburg. So it's Carl Sandburg. He lived from 1878 to 1967. And I love his poems. Like his poems are really, 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 really good. Really good. Really good. I'm not going to read any of his poem here, but he's the writer that I'll be emulating. So the process for copying the writers will be I'll read this poem, I'll get I'll read this poem, I would write that style, exactly that style of poem, right? I'll try to change the topic and write it for something else, right? Using almost all the devices. Then I'll take inspiration from the poem and I will use it to write my own poem. Now, of course, next week I'm going to talk about all the detailed steps, all the things I use for copying. But I think now it's copying. I think I feel excited just thinking about it because now I'm going to be working on something tangible. And because I have chosen one writer, which is Carl Sandburg, I'll just pick one of his poems and do that every day. It makes it really, really easy because now that when I show up, I'm not like, oh, what should I do today? You just like read the poem for like 5 minutes, go through it, and like write to it. And next week I'll share everything. So if you Would love to see that. Please subscribe and let me know. And if you have any other poets that you'd recommend for me to start copying and imitating in order to find my voice and style, please let me know in the comment section or by replying to this email. Okay, so so far now I'll be continuing the schedule and the pace. I'll keep writing. I'll keep writing the same time. Nothing changes every day. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll gladly respond to them. Until next time, my name is Michi.